Vanessa, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's a pleasure to have you. And I stumbled across you through the Sounds True podcast, a personal fave of mine, and immediately we liked your story, how you spoke. I liked your authenticity. And one thing on your website that spoke to me was you giving your bio. And you said, okay, this is like the real story. I'm going to give you the real story and talk to you like you're actually a human being. And then you can have the dolled up version. And that totally spoke to me because I was like, oh, there's so many filters and masks that we put on in society. And it is so refreshing to talk with people who are like, but this is actually me. Like, this is the real me. And I'm going to dare to show you that.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. And, I certainly feel like I need to walk my own talk, right? And also it is just a more joyful way to live when we can be more authentic and bring our whole selves to the table. And I'm always astounded by anytime I share something that I think is embarrassing and vulnerable or a part of myself I'm kind of ashamed of. It pretty much always brings me closer to the person I'm sharing it with, but it's like I have to learn that lesson every time.
Yeah. I don't know why it's so hard. Like, we know this, right? Like, vulnerability and openness is the connector, and then you're still there, like often paralyzed with the fear of judgment or something. But, we can know how it goes. I totally had, I don't know if you're like this yourself, but I had one of these days where I was mildly anxious. When you're kind of procrastinating or angry cleaning, I'm totally the queen of that. Like, the kind of, I've got to pick up everything really quickly and put it over here. And I had that, then saw one of your Instagram posts actually, where you actually spoke to that. And I was like, that was so funny that I stumbled across it because you spoke to that exact experience and it kind of demonstrating a mild anxiety and challenging people to just go a bit slower. Like, it's okay to just slow down a little bit. And you know what? I actually felt my entire energy shift in that because I had a moment where doing this interview, I mean, full honesty here, doing this interview, having quality time with my son after school became another thing on my day's to-do list. Instead of it actually being something that brings me joy, which it often is, but it was totally that mindset game. And I think you being that reminder there to slow down actually opened that space up. It released some of that like nervous tension that so many of us carry around and brought in more presence, really. So thanks for that.
Oh my gosh, you're welcome. I'm so glad you had that experience. I mean, it sounds like you're someone who's really soaking these things in and reflecting on them and thinking about them and applying them to your life, which is so inspiring and fun to hear about, and yes, I've noticed in myself, like I get in go mode around the house sometimes, like a tornado, just of cleaning and frantic, sort of like at a frantic pace. So it's always helpful when I catch myself doing that to just pause. And it's funny how quickly we can shift sometimes if we're don't have too much momentum in the other direction, where I'll just look at like the lights and the shadows of the leaves on the wall and I can kind of soothe my mind and my nervous system with 3 to 5 breaths. So yeah, it's fun when you can notice that and make the shift, because then you get this instantaneous feedback loop of, oh, now I feel better.
Absolutely. It's the little transformations that really accrue over time and lead to something quite dramatic. So, hearing this stuff about the breath work and the meditation, it's spoken about so much because it actually works.
Yes. And for the times when you notice it and you can't do anything or you don't do anything about it, that's fine too. Like my husband and I were hosting a big dinner party this weekend, and we were the most organized and prepared we've ever been. We had everything like cooked in advance. This never happens to us. And yet I noticed there was still a lot of anxiety. Like in the 10 minutes before everyone arrived, we started frantically cleaning things we didn't even need to clean. And I just sort of observed that and was like, okay, I guess there's some level of anxiety that we just have about hosting that we're going to channel into whatever, even if we're prepared and everything's done, and in those moments, I like to use the self-compassion phrase from my book that I got from Jen Sincero, which is, I'm just a little bunny doing my best. And so I'll say that to myself a lot. Like, oh, we're all just little bunnies doing our best, because it pops you into humor, which is like, you can't be in self-criticism and humor at the same time. So that's where I go when I see myself in the anxiety, but I'm not stopping it. I'm not shifting my mind.
Yeah,
I
yeah,
just go, I'm
yeah.
just a little bunny doing my best.
I see that, inviting in the a lightheartedness, right? Like not being so serious about everything, taking ourselves and life so seriously, which can often be hard to not do. But yeah.
Yeah, because even, the tools in this book or that we're talking about today, what I've noticed as a perfectionist overachiever is I can even use these tools against myself as one more thing that I should be doing. And then one more reason why I'm falling short.
Ditto. I feel you. I feel you. But Vanessa, I want to go over to your previous you when you were working as a private equity investor, deeply entrenched in a male dominated world. I can't imagine the dynamic of that as well with the perfectionism overachieving loop. But I want to hear about what your life was like at that time and how you were doing at that time.
Yeah. So I took a very intense job after college doing investment banking on Wall Street at a firm called Morgan Stanley. And I would work just around the clock, these 100+ hour weeks. I remember when I pulled my first all-nighter, like I slept at the office and the partners came in the next day and were like high-fiving me, like, yeah, you did your first all-nighter. And all I did was
Really?
basically babysit in a copy room and like count page numbers on a PowerPoint deck to make sure that none of the pages were missing for I remember thinking, why are they so proud of me for doing this? Like this doesn't seem like a great use of time or energy. And, it was just this culture that was very intense and misogynistic at times. So then I went on to work in private equity at JP Morgan Partners doing these billion-dollar buyouts. Again, very intense culture. And when I did get out of work, I would feel so drained and exhausted. I would either drink a little too much alcohol with my girlfriends or zone out in front of really bad television. That was basically how I managed my stress for many years. I actually, at the time, I knew that I didn't love the jobs, but I was getting a really good skill set and I knew it was going to be a good platform for whatever I wanted to do in life. So I was stressed out, but I also was kind of in my early 20s and early 30s felt like, well, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. And then what happened is I went to get my MBA from Stanford, thought about doing something entrepreneurial when I graduated, but chickened out. And at the time, I told myself, well, it'd be more responsible to go back to finance to pay off student loans. But in hindsight, it was really fear that kept me paralyzed, and not just a fear of failure, but also a fear of not knowing what I wanted to do with my life. If I wasn't
Yeah.
kind of following this prescribed path, I felt like my whole life I had followed this ladder of go to a good school, get good grades, get a good job, get a promotion, get into a good grad school, get another good job. And I got to the top of the ladder and was like, crap, I think this is the wrong ladder. It didn't bring the level of happiness and fulfillment and frankly, peace of mind that I thought I would have when I got to the end goal. And so for me, it was a couple of things that created my starting over moment. I looked at the partners at my firm and I had this epiphany of, I'm on track to be a partner at this firm. I'm a vice president, and yet I don't really want to be a partner at this firm. So I'm on a track that's leading me somewhere I don't really want to go. And then I had this other insight where I realized, oh my gosh, my whole life, I've been following my ego and my mind and my wallet and kind of what society and our culture says I should do, this prescribed path, rather than my heart or my intuition. And maybe that's why I'm so unfulfilled.
Hmm. So did it
And
really manifest for you as a sense of emptiness or hollowness, or was there much more kind of anxiety, high stress, high pressure?
it's a great question. For me, it started as this vague disquiet inside and this vague feeling of dissatisfaction of, I don't think I really want to be doing this. And I decided, okay, I don't think I want to stay in this job forever, but what do I want to do? And I started researching other options. And I was going to launch this whole baby products business. I was being very MBA about it. I did all this consumer research. I put together a slide deck. I was going to raise venture capital to pay myself a salary. And then I woke up one morning and thought, what am I doing? I don't give a crap about baby products. I didn't even have a baby at the time. And I realized, oh, I'm researching this idea because I think it's a good business idea, but not because my heart is into it, not because I'm passionate about it. And if I start this company, I'm just going to be an unfulfilled entrepreneur instead of an unfulfilled private equity investor. And so it was a series of trying to find something else and feeling how that other something else was also not a good fit, which is a very scary and difficult experience to have when you're like, well, I don't want this thing. Okay, let me try. Well, I don't really want that. Maybe I'm just lazy. Maybe I'm picky. Maybe there's something wrong with me. And then what happened was I read the book Many Lives, Many Masters by Brian Weiss about that time, which is all about past lives and reincarnation. And
A previous guest mentioned that actually like a week or two ago. Yeah, as a sort of an opening book. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great book. Highly recommend it. But I didn't even think I cared about reincarnation for past lives. But I read that book and was so blown away by it. I thought, what has this guy been doing since then? And I Googled his name. This was in September of 2009. And the first search result said, Brian Weiss coming to San Francisco in October. So I felt like, okay, I have to be there. So that started me down this whole other rabbit hole of, a spiritual awakening, which was not what I thought I was looking for at the time.
And were you still working in banking at that point?
I was still working in banking at that point, yes. And then I had worked with an executive coach for a couple of years on different things. And I went to her and I remember mentioning, I read this book with Brian Weiss and I went and saw him and got hypnotized and taken to a past life. And this stuff is crazy. And she was like, oh yeah, I've had a past life regression. And I remember thinking, what? You've been my coach for years and you never mentioned this to me. And she gave me that old line, well, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. And so then she introduced me to Ainsley MacLeod, who wrote a book called The Instruction. And she said, read his book and then guess what you think your soul age and your soul type is. He lays it all out in the book. And then I'll get you on his friends and family list. You can do a session with him and he'll tell you what his spirit guides think your soul age and soul type and your soul purpose is. And I still remember sitting in my corner office in finance, working in private equity, because I asked to be on his cancellation list. So it was like midweek during a workday where they said, we have an opening. And I said, yes, I'll take it. And I had my little headset on and I closed my office door. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I'm on the phone with someone who calls himself a reluctant psychic about to hear about my past lives. Like, what am I doing? And yet we had this very profound conversation where he said, your soul type is something called spiritualist, and you're never going to be satisfied in finance with that soul type. And that was a moment where my whole world went like, what?
And what was your spirituality like before? I mean, what I read on your website was some woo-woo shit. So when I read that, I was like, okay. Which I totally get because I was totally at that point. And I think it's something that progresses, right? Like it's a slight opening and then you're like, there's something in that, or that's speaking to me in a way that I've never experienced that before. And almost it can go beyond something that you ever thought imaginable for you. So I don't know whether that was your experience too.
Yes. Well, I wouldn't have called myself a spiritual person before then. And I hadn't really identified with organized religion. I was raised Quaker, but mostly because my parents were each a different religion and wanted to choose a religion together. And I was always proud to be Quaker because I liked that they were part of the Underground Railroad. And, they also believe that we don't need someone to communicate with God. We can all communicate with God directly. But when I was in middle school, we kind of stopped going to church or meetings as they are called in the Quaker church, but we stopped going because of sports and things. And I remember trying to connect with Jesus and God in high school at these young life camps, which frankly, a lot of us went to just because the cute boys were going to them, not because we were really looking for God. But I remember there was a longing in me because I would journal about it and they would say, oh, you can talk to Jesus. And I would try to talk to Jesus. And I was like, I don't feel like I hear anything back. I don't know what to do. And so I had a longing and a curiosity, but then it just kind of got tabled. And I went into the mainstream culture of achievement, which here in the West is very individual and, no pain, no gain, all of that. I kind of bought into it by default without realizing it. And then as I got older and older, I've come to really cherish my spiritual practices now. And what started as reading one book, I then trained with Brian Weiss in hypnosis and past life regression healing. So I can hypnotize clients and take them to past lives. And I've been doing that for about 10 years. And then in the last 5 or 6 years, sometimes when I'm looking at people, I can see their past lives and in the last couple of years, I've started working with this council of light beings and channeling things. So it just keeps going.
Yeah. Well, let's go into that a little bit because I think so many people listening are going to be like, past life regression? What? Like, what are you talking about? What is
Yes.
that?
And it's, it's a very small percentage of what I do in my work and with my business, but I find it really enjoyable. And what's cool about past life regression healing, so you can hypnotize a person and take them back to childhood and then to past lives. And whether you believe in reincarnation and past lives or not, someone's current life symptoms can go away immediately in a single session. So an example would be a simple one. Let's say a woman has really bad morning sickness when she's pregnant, and she also has this fear of not having food near her, and she finds she has to like have a snack on her body at all times. And that sounds kind of reasonable for pregnancy. You might think, oh, that's just normal. And then do a past life regression healing. And she was destitute on the streets when she was pregnant and didn't have enough to eat. And the baby was malnourished. This is a real example. And she gave birth to a stillborn that was dead and ended up having a really difficult experience. And then you bring the person out of that hypnosis. And what happens is the desire to have food, the anxiety around food, the need to have a snack on her at all times went away immediately.
Wow.
And so whether you believe that, she's tapping into the collective unconscious or her own subconscious mind, or whether that's actually a past life, my attitude is, well, we don't need to argue about the semantics. We probably can't prove it one way or the other. But if someone's symptoms are alleviated, that's what I'm interested in. Is it effective? Is it working? Is it offering value to people? Other times people will get insights into their life purpose and things like that.
Okay, so how would it actually work in terms of a session? And are they producing these ideas that comes to them in under a state of hypnosis?
Sure. Well, in a session, you guide a person into a deeply relaxed state using some form of an induction, a hypnotic induction, a progressive relaxation. And often I'll take them down a stairway and through a door into a past, they go into a garden, this very healing place, and they might have a guide or a family member who's transitioned might come and visit them. And I will say, my husband, who's very skeptical of these things, he was like, I don't want you to take me to a past life, but you can take me to the garden. And then I took him to the garden, and his grandfather, who has transitioned, who's died, came and visited him in the garden and gave him this really profound message. And he was just crying. So even that alone can be a very powerful experience for someone. And then, the guide or the person who comes into the garden to greet them walks with them to this building. You go through a door into a past life. And you typically have the person look at their feet first and just notice, like, are they wearing shoes? Are they barefoot? Does the body seem male or female? So as the practitioner, you just continue asking questions kind of quickly, because you don't want the person to get too much in their analytical thinking mind. Mm-hmm. And the thing I can say, I've visited probably like 20 of my own past lives, because when I first got trained in this, I was so curious, like, how many have I had? What do they all mean? And so I was in a group with 2 other therapists, and we would get together every couple weeks and just hypnotize each other, take each other to past lives. But having experienced it and had lots of clients go through it, it's actually kind of anticlimactic, meaning you're lying there with your eyes closed and the whole time, oh, I'm Shannon lying here in my home in Switzerland. And yet I also see this woman with long brown hair by the river, hand washing her clothes on the rocks. Okay, that's weird. So it just sort of seems like your mind is making things up, and you kind of go with it, and you go with the imagery to see where it leads. And I guide the person and ask questions, and you typically take them to, an important or meaningful day in that life. And you go to several of those, and then you take them to the end of life transition from that life. And then afterwards, you can also float above and talk to a whole council about, okay, what was the purpose of that life? And what were some of the lessons that were learned? And people get really interesting insights. Yeah. I was just in Texas for one of my book launch events hosted by a woman. I did a past life regression healing for her, probably 11 years ago. And she said she was talking to a group of friends about it 2 weeks prior and still started crying, remembering it. And I've had the same experience in my own. Some of them can be so deeply moving, and it's it's kind of wild. It's like, what are we accessing here?
Did you have a point where you were totally skeptical about this before you even started, or were like, okay, this is just like a mental movie that I'm making up, or the person doing this is asking leading questions, and this?
For me, when I went to the Brian Weiss training, something in my body just like jumped out. Like, I have to go to this. And I talk about that in the book as following your energetic breadcrumbs, like those moments when you feel really alive and energized by something. It's not going to be past lives for most people, but that was my energetic breadcrumb. And so I ended up, in this Holiday Inn ballroom, downtown San Francisco. Brian Weiss, who wrote that book, was on stage about to hypnotize 200 of us, take us to past lives. And I had this very profound experience where I went to a past life where I saw like my son, and I was dying and I was leaving him. And it was so deep that during the break, I had to go and lock myself in a bathroom stall and just cry. And before that day, my husband and I had just started talking about trying to have kids, and I had adamantly not wanted a boy. So much so that I had said, I think we can do that thing where we like spin your sperm to make sure we get the gender we want. And then I go to this past life where I'm this mom who's leaving her boy. And I felt so sad. I felt the pain of a mother losing a child. And it was intense and emotional, and I cried. And then when I left that ballroom that day, I went out to my husband and I was like, I feel totally fine about having a boy. I feel completely different. It was wild. And so for me, I'm someone who is skeptical, but also will try a lot of things. And if they work for me, I'm kind of all in. And then if I use them with other people and they work for them, I'm even more all in. And so for me, having had a direct experience that changed something in me permanently, I've been convinced ever since. And then lo and behold, I now have a 6-year-old boy who's got blonde towhead hair. In that past life, I had a little boy with white blonde towhead hair. And so it's all just, I don't know. I can't, I'm not going to try to explain it to folks who are cynical, but if you're interested, there's lots of books and resources out there to learn more. Or you can find me on my website if you want to do a one-on-one session. It's great.
I guess it's just like, it's a whole nother layer to these questions of healing and even personal development in ways, because I guess what I'm hearing without knowing much about this is there could be an impression that is left on you from a past life that is in some ways guiding or shaping how you behave now in this one. And most people wouldn't think of that. And most psychotherapy and psychologists and so on would be looking at what has actually happened in your life now that has led you to adopt these patterns of behavior and thinking patterns and so forth. So would you say that that is something that people could consider, an idea that there's something they're carrying from a past life that's getting in the way, and that this would be a way of releasing that?
Yeah, completely. Yes. And sometimes, there might be like something difficult that happened, that there's a fear of a similar experience. So you're acting in ways that don't even match your current circumstances or your current context. For example, a lot of people who want to write a book or speak on stage, public speaking, they have a big fear of that. Maybe they had a past life where they literally were stoned to death or severely punished for speaking their truth. And yet the consequences if they're in, Europe, the Western world today, of them doing that, they won't be physically harmed, but there's a feeling that's so intense that can feel as if you're going to be physically harmed. And so sometimes that might be from childhood or from your reptilian brain or things you can work out in therapy. But other times, perhaps it comes from something deeper that happened even longer ago. Yeah.
So for people listening to this right now who that's piqued their curiosity, what would you suggest are some good first steps, good first books, or some other points to consider?
Great question. Well, I talk a little bit about it in my book, so you can read it there. And then I really do recommend Brian Weiss's book, Many Lives, Many Masters, and Ainsley MacLeod's book, The Instruction. Those are two really good kind of intro level books about it. And then if you're interested in doing a session, you can email my assistant, Robin, ROBYN, at vanessaloder.com. And I can do them over Zoom. It's kind of crazy. You really can. You could go get hypnotized, or you can also do a Google search for practitioners in your area if you'd like to do it in person.
Yeah. So going back a little to your story, this sounds like worlds apart from Wall Street banking, right? Like, how was that actually received with your previous community at work? Was that ever something you had to navigate?
Yes. Well, so I also do corporate workshops and keynote speaking. I'm not leading with past lives and reincarnation with my corporate clients. So it is sort of, you meet people where they're at. And when I quit my job, I actually didn't know what I was going to do next. And then all these people started coming to me for coaching advice because they wanted to quit their jobs. And that I would leave these coffee meetings and lunches feeling so energized and alive. And that was my first energetic breadcrumb of, oh, maybe I want to do executive coaching. So I started running group coaching programs and retreats for women who wanted to find work that they loved. And then also doing corporate workshops and keynotes and, leadership team offsites and those kinds of things. And so I would say that I'm meeting people where they're at, and I have my most sort of spiritual offerings are for private clients. And then the corporate stuff is much more around mindful leadership, how to lean in without burning out. How can you shift your inner critic to your inner coach, or maybe do a visioning? I do a lot of visioning workshops across all my clients. I'm a huge believer in the power of visualization to create more of what you want in your life. So that's something that I lead with.
Yeah.
But then I will say, when I first started sending out my newsletter, I did have a lot of my finance contacts on that. And I was a little sheepish sometimes around, oh gosh, they're going to see that I'm, trained in past life regression healing. And yet what I have found is my most loyal clients typically are the people who resonate the most with my work. They come from some type of traditional background, whether it's consulting or finance or they're a lawyer. And they actually are really intrigued by that one line in my bio that says past life regression healing, because there's something in them that is also curious about these tools. And so in some ways, it's actually what makes me unique. My unique differentiator is, having kind of a foot in both worlds as like a Stanford MBA spiritual teacher.
Yeah, I see that. How have your views on success changed? Have they at all?
Yes, they have. And they continue to evolve. Or I don't even know if my views continue to evolve, but practicing and living by my views and my values is a constant thing that I do, because I talk about this in the book. There's one of the chapters called The Success Myth. What I found is our culture has a very myopic and narrow definition of success. It's all about money, power over, prestige, promotions. And I, in my 20s, adopted that without questioning it, just because in school, the goal was always get good grades. So there was this external authority telling you what the goal is in school. When you go into the working world, if you don't pause to tune into yourself or ask some bigger questions, it's very easy to transition from that school mentality to this workplace mentality of, okay, well, what are the metrics and how do I succeed? And you let someone else tell you what the metrics are for your success. Now, of course, if there's a job description, you want to meet it and all of that. But what I found was our culture, especially here in the West, in the United States, I'm curious how much you would say it is true in Switzerland, it doesn't embrace the definition of success that's holistic, that considers the well-being of the whole person. How much time are you spending giving back to your community? How much time are you spending with your children? Are you laughing every day? Are you moving your body? Are you spending time in nature? All these other things that really matter to us, we don't include them in our definition of success, which is actually kind of ludicrous if we think about what truly matters when you're on your deathbed looking back at your life.
Yeah.
Someone said it to me recently, like is it resume building or eulogy building, which I thought was an interesting angle. Like, are you doing something that makes your resume look better, or that someone would say it's your eulogy?
Yeah.
And so I think it's important that we each redefine success for ourselves and come up with something that's more aligned with our values, and then stay true to that. And so for me, that is really a daily practice, though, because here I have a book coming out in the world, and I just came out, and of course, I want to sell more books, and my ego wants to sell more books. And so I've had these moments of, how do I stay true to my soul and what I really want to do, and not get too caught up in the fear and the numbers of selling more books? It's been kind of ironic to write a book about, listening to the voice of the soul rather than the voice of the ego, and then have the ego be like, you're not selling enough of those.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's a constant balancing act, isn't it? And there's something about knowing what your values are and then actually making that commitment and putting your conscious awareness on what you're trying to live out on the daily. I mean, what I heard there is really the distinction between doing and being. You know, you're saying in the resume versus eulogy, because often as a eulogy, it's much more about who you are as a person, not what achievement you had, typically speaking. And I think for anyone who identifies as a perfectionist, a recovering perfectionist, will know how difficult it is to extricate a sense of personal worth from achievement and from doing. And I mean, that's something that I've constantly battled with. I don't know on your front there, like even questions of how do you still pursue excellence, but let go of the perfectionism and do that from a grounded, rooted place where your worth isn't put on the table.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I love how thoughtful you are about all of this. And for me, it's a moment to moment attunement to how I feel that really informs that. Because I can tell when I have energy and inspiration and momentum to complete a task and to do it really well versus when I'm acting from should. And so it's sort of like, do I feel good or am I acting from should? Like I should get this done in this way, but I'm not really feeling it. And sometimes I've even found that I'm just tired. And if I go lie down for 10 minutes and do nothing and then come back to the task, my energy is able to be more aligned to complete it and do it well. So sometimes I was pushing myself too hard. And I think that's another one in our culture. We're taught to just go, 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 push yourself all the time rather than honoring the fact that our bodies and our brains, we actually work in cycles. We work best in cycles. We're meant to be cyclical, both in big and small ways and during the day and in seasons. You know, I have creative bursts where I'm really producing a lot of content. And then I have times when I'm really wanting to go inward, where I'm processing and integrating a lot myself. And it's not a good time to make myself write a blog post. But it's been tricky to honor that because, of course, the should voice says, well, you got to write every week and you got to post every day, every couple of days. So
I mean, how
it's
do you
learning to trust
actually
yourself.
manage that? How do you actually manage that? Because I mean, I've seen this since showing up more on social media, for example. I use that because I want to grow this podcast and I'm told, well, obviously I need to have my profile out there. Then of course it all centers on being consistent, showing up consistently. And it's so hard in those moments where, as you're describing, it's like I have those moments, like I'm sure so many people listening, like I need to go quiet right now. I don't want to show up. And where do you find that balance between the discipline necessary to achieve something and perhaps I could do better by scheduling in advance, for example, to allow for that? You know, I'm sure there are ways around it, but it's constantly that balance between should I force through this versus listening to what I actually need in that moment and stepping back. How do you deal with that?
I've just been paying attention to how I feel and what are the results I'm producing and course correcting as needed. So, for me, I try to harness the times of inspiration and write and batch out a lot of content in one fell swoop that then my assistant posts. So I don't have to log on to social media that often because I don't like to be on there that often. And then I try to, okay, I'm going to look at LinkedIn and respond to comments once a week, but I give myself flexibility about when that hour is so that I'm not doing it when I'm really tired. But in terms of like paying attention and noticing the results, it's a constant course correction for me, you know, and I hired a firm to help me with some marketing with the book coming out on LinkedIn. And I was like writing a lot of posts all the time for them. And sometimes I really didn't want to. And I still made myself do it. And then this one day, I was just naturally inspired about this. My daughter, it was really this like kind of sad moment where I was supposed to be spending time with my daughter and she made a comment about how I'm always on my phone. And I was surprised because I'm never on my phone doing work or social media when I'm with my kids at all. And I was like, what do you mean? And then I noticed I'm on my phone a lot, organizing play dates for her and like organizing stuff over text message all the time in front of my kids. So anyway, I made this new commitment, put my phone up on a shelf from like 5 to 7 p.m. every night. And I felt really connected in emotionally with it all. And I quickly went on LinkedIn and did a little post about it. That got the most shares and likes of anything I had done for a month and a half. And it was better than any of the posts that this fancy branding firm had helped me create with fancy graphics. And so it was just if you pay attention, you will notice that the results are even better when you honor your truth and when you get in alignment first and then take the action. And that's kind of been the difference for me in the mantra I've used is get into alignment and then take action.
Yeah.
So if I'm not in alignment with myself, my job is actually to go get in alignment with me again. Sometimes that might mean doing yoga or exercising. That might mean lying on the couch or going for a walk or listening to music, but doing something to get back into alignment before you take the action. And when I do that, I feel better and my results are better.
Yeah, I love that. And I really appreciate the connection between looking at how you're feeling and the results too. And actually seeing the outcome of it, not just like, okay, I got that done, but what was what was the result of that? I mean, that's so key. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And also remembering that if I hate what I'm doing, even if I get great results, because I remember thinking this years ago, some people in my field have been very successful by making weekly YouTube videos. And I thought, but if I do that really well and it does grow my list, then I have to make a video every week. I don't want to do that. That doesn't sound fun to me. It's not going to be enjoyable. I didn't leave finance to build another business that doesn't bring me satisfaction. And so even if you get good results, if the journey to your goal is not enjoyable, what is the point really?
Yes.
I mean, why are we doing it?
Exactly. No, I think there is a lot of wisdom in following where you enjoy the process, because society will always be telling us to focus on the outcomes, and that's often what's praised and held up as something worthy of applause. But actually, how you live your life is what you're doing in the process of that thing at work, and that's where it matters.
Yes. And sometimes you're going to be doing the thing no matter what. So it is like a mindset adjustment, and for example, just cooking and wiping the counters down during COVID felt like so monotonous to me. All the home cooked meals and all the wiping of like we have a big kitchen island with lots of crumbs. And so I've played around with, well, I'm going to do that. I'm going to be making meals for my family. My husband and I both share in that task, but we're both going to be doing that for many years to come. So how can I find ways to get into alignment with me and find more joy and satisfaction in that process? And so I've found ways of doing that have really helped. And one thing I do is segment intending, where when you transition from one segment of your day to another, and this is inspired by Abraham Hicks, you set an intention for how you want the next segment to go. So when I'm leaving work is walking down the hallway to be with my kids because I work from home. But when I'm walking down the hallway at the end of the day, I set the intention, okay, I'm going to be in divine loving presence with my kids for the next 2 hours. I'm going to be really present. I intend to be playful. I intend lots of laughter and giggles and joy, whatever it might be. And one time I was leading a meditation to help people set an intention for their day. And I have people visualize the different segments. And I have people visualize a very mundane task you're going to be doing. And you connect it with your heart first to ask, how do I want to feel today? What quality of beingness do I really want to call forward? And for me on this one day when I was leading the meditation, playfulness came up. And then I take people through visualizing different segments of your day. If you were to show up embodying that quality of beingness, like playfulness, what might you say or do differently? What might that look like? How might other people respond to you? So you take yourself through different segments, imagining yourself embodying that quality. And then I take people through a mundane segment. So you're at the grocery store or you're unloading the dishwasher, you're wiping crumbs from the counter, again, embodying that quality. So when you set an intention to feel a certain way, you actually really can cultivate more of what you want, even when you're doing a task you might consider a little bit more mundane.
Yes, I love that. And I think the idea of breaking things down into segments is really brilliant there, because I think when something goes awry, something's unexpected and supposedly undesirable, we often write off our whole day. Like, oh, that's just like a shit day now because that one thing happened, rather than actually seeing that as a part that can have a start and an end, and then you change your energy and move into something else. And I can see that could be a very useful practice for people.
Yes. Yeah, I love it when I catch myself in those downward spirals and can shift it.
Exactly. So have you heard the saying, we teach best what we most need to learn?
Yes.
Now that you're a teacher, what did you most need to learn?
Oh, I mean, I think honestly, it's the core message of the book, which is to trust myself and to trust my inner knowing, my soul, my deeper truth, rather than what the voice of my ego or my inner critic or, our culture says I should do, and to honor that. That's what I most continue to need to learn.
Yeah. Journey again. So what was it like not trusting yourself? How does that show up in your life?
Lots of ways, pushing myself to work when I don't want to. I mean, my whole path in finance, I think I was so lost to myself. I was out of touch with myself. So, first you have to kind of find yourself again sometimes before you can even trust yourself, because you don't even know who you are. You've been so busy doing what you should do. So I think in the beginning for me, I had lost myself. So I had to kind of find myself, and then I had to trust myself. And now I'm more in tune with myself, but I still find it hard to trust myself sometimes, especially with the whole, like, have I worked enough today question, because sometimes I'm just, especially lately, I'm more tired, and I have a hard time honoring that and feeling like I did enough that day, and it's okay to just rest or take a break. So that's one area that I still work on.
Yeah. Well, thanks for the honesty. I think there's always areas that we're still working on. And that's the thing about these big lessons. And in ways, I think there is often our biggest strength can be our biggest weakness. I often think of that in relation to, say, empathy for me. I'm a very empathic person, and that means that I have lots of beautiful, deep connections with people, lovely relationships, more facility with people I just meet. But then the flip side of that was also that it had been harder to set boundaries, and I often let other people make decisions for me because I wanted to go with the flow and not disrupt things too much. I ended up with a narcissistic partner. Like all of that really came to a point that I needed to shift and change my life. But I often think on that point about strength and weakness, and really moving into the part where we can harness our strength and not let it get too much on the flip sides. I think now, and what you're sharing through your book, and we'll come on to that now, there's a side where you can so speak from knowing as a lived experience, not just because of your credentials, because you've got this certificate from that university or that course, but it's like, this is my life and this is how I've lived it, and I get you. I get you. And I get you, and I know the steps that you need to take. And maybe they'll be a little bit different for different people, but this is how the trope typically tends to go.
Right. Well, and the steps are really to help you reconnect with yourself and trust yourself, and then you'll find your own steps.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I'm curious if you've ever done the Enneagram assessment, because have you heard of that?
I have, yes. I'm in the enthusiast.
I'm like, are you the enthusiast, the 7?
Yes,
okay.
The number 7. I don't know it in detail, but yeah, I think it was just being very enthusiastic and warm and friendly, and then having problems with discipline and stuff.
Yeah.
Definitely
pretty much.
The case.
Well, when you're talking about going with the flow and harmony, I was like, well, I wonder if she's a 9, because that's very much of a 9 characteristic. Yeah.
I'll have to look at it in a little bit more detail, but no. So what is the soul solution?
What is the soul solution? Well, that's the book that I just wrote. And at its core, it really is about helping women learn how to trust themselves, to tune into that inner knowing and follow those energetic breadcrumbs and your soul whispers to create a life that's just more true to who you really are.
And more satisfied, you say. I think it speaks to what you said before about so many people realize, as you did with going up a certain ladder and getting to the top and going, oh shit, like I thought that I was going to feel a certain way through this experience or this accolade. I don't feel that at all. So where do I go from here? There's 3 things in your book that I want to talk about. You've mentioned a couple there already. So a couple of your chapters, the whispers of your soul. So key steps for tuning out external noise and accessing authenticity. Your energetic breadcrumbs, as you've described, so how the universe signals to you when you're on the right path. Love that. And the upward spiral, so this surrender, allow, trust to get more of what you want with ease. I recently did an episode with somebody on letting go, and that resonated so much, but then people were actually like, how do I actually let go? Like in that moment, how do I let go? I can't do that. Everything around me is like, I'm scared. I feel like I've got to hold on to control. So let's start with this upward spiral method that you describe first.
Yes. Well, it's a meditation as well as a practice that you can do each morning. So if you buy the book through my website, there's a book link at the top, then you can get a whole resource vault with guided meditations and downloadable PDFs and all these things. So that's what I'd recommend doing. But on that page with all the free meditations, there's one called Surrender, Allow, and Trust. And what it is it's a morning meditation practice that you do every morning. And if you don't want to do that full meditation, you could even just do it on your own by saying the key phrases, I surrender, allow, and trust. And you can use the words the universe, or if you believe in God or source, or life force, whatever you want to use, but some version of I surrender, allow, and trust the universe to move in me, as me, and through me today. And then you can add other things onto that. I surrender, allow, and trust the universe to help me access my creativity today, or I surrender, allow, and trust. So it's just a way of setting an intention. And what I have found is when you do that in the morning, it plants a kernel in your subconscious mind that's there for the rest of the day. And you might suddenly make a different choice or behave slightly differently because you've set that intention in the morning. Now, if you're in a moment, to your question of like, oh, when I'm really trying, like I'm in the situation, how can I surrender? That can be really hard to do. And I even remember when I did my training with Brian Weiss around hypnosis, he said, often I'll have people come to me where the wife has read all my books and she loves everything. She can't wait to have this experience. And the husband, she'll drag her husband there. He doesn't really want to be there. And he doesn't know who I am or why he's sitting here. And then we'll do the hypnosis and the husband will have a very profound experience and the wife will just be blocked. Nothing happens. And he said the reason is because if you're trying really hard, it can actually block your mind from receiving. And I remember sitting in the audience when he gave that sort of pep talk, pre-warning, whatever you want to call it, thinking, well, great, I'm here to I'm the wife in that situation. And I really want to have an experience. How can I try to not, okay, I'm trying to not try. I'm trying to not try. I'm trying to, it's really hard when you're in those situations to truly surrender. And, what I would recommend in that case is to just ask yourself, how can I soften or surrender just 10% more? Or you could start with even 2%. Let me soften 2% more into this moment. So maybe it's too big of an ask when your kids are screaming and you're stuck in the car with them to try to surrender to that moment. You're not going to go from rage to surrender on the dial. You need to give yourself a little incremental move. How can I soften 2% right now? How can I, maybe taking 3 deep breaths. All right. And actually, instead of trying to surrender to the moment, maybe you just surrender to the anger that you're feeling right now. Okay. Let me soften towards this anger, 2%. All right, I'm surrendering to the fact that there is anger coursing through my veins and I want to slam on the brakes right now. My kids are making me so angry. So that's a way to do it in a more manageable bite size so that you can feel the difference in your nervous system right away.
I've certainly found personally that if you lean into an emotion and let it move through you, it will pass much quicker. And that can feel really hard to do, but actually just that experience of going, I'm allowing myself to be angry right now, it will often reduce.
Really does. And the thing is, when you observe the anger, you immediately distance yourself from it because now you're the witness, you're in the observer seat instead of being the anger. So even just going, oh, anger, and then taking a couple of deep breaths, that you've already started the process of surrendering and allowing.
Are there any other experiences that come to mind or events that people could find themselves in that they could use this to guide them, the idea of surrendering and trusting?
Yeah. Well, my biggest thing would be to say, be proactive about it before you're in a situation, which is why I think doing it as the morning ritual practice, the meditation, is really useful because you're kind of building the muscle before you need it. So the best is to set the stage in advance. But if you've already gotten yourself in a situation and, you're frustrated, something's not going the way you want it. The other thing that I think is helpful, I use the equation E plus R equals O, which stands for the events in our life plus our response or our reaction equals our outcome. And so if you're in a situation where, let's say, you were interviewing for a new job or you wanted this big promotion, you didn't get it, and you're just so mad or frustrated or discouraged, disappointed. You start to get in a bad mood and you're noodling on it, and then you lash out at your partner, and then you're in a big fight. That's a downward spiral. Instead, if you could recognize, okay, or like you're at the airport and your flight is canceled and delayed or whatever, those situations. You can recognize, okay, I don't have control over the E in this situation, the event, but I always have control over the R, which is my response or my reaction. And depending on my R, I can have a totally different outcome. And so when you're in the airport and your flight is delayed, it's like, okay, I'm starting to get really mad and frustrated. How can I change my R to have a better outcome right now? Like, what's one small thing I could do? Well, maybe I'll go treat myself to like a slice of pizza. I am kind of hungry right now. And you're just going to do that to give yourself a slightly different reaction.
I think a lot of us feel that. And like I said, it can often be difficult to surrender in those moments. And the first step really seems to be accepting the present moment in where we're at to be able to move through. And as hard as that can seem sometimes, I guess that's one of the key first steps.
Yeah. Or accepting that you don't want to accept the present moment.
So the other thing I wanted to come to was this idea of energetic breadcrumbs and the universe sending us signals that we're on the right path. How has this, describe that a little bit for us.
Yeah. So, a lot of people come to me looking for more clarity on their next steps. And energetic breadcrumbs, basically, there are these moments when you feel really energized and alive and awake or just curious inside your body. Like your little inner spidey sense goes off about something. And the thing about our energetic breadcrumbs is we tend to dismiss them because we might think that they're insignificant or trivial. And yet all those breadcrumbs add up to a cake. They really do lead you to your most satisfied, joyful, fulfilling life. It's just that you have to pay attention and follow them. And I think a lot of us dismiss them because they're trivial, or we dismiss them because we don't know what the end goal is or what the outcome is. So why would I follow this thing? Because where is it leading me to? Where is it going? But if you want to live a more soul-centric, soul-aligned life, the thing is, it's an emergent process. It's not always here's the goal, let me chase it. You're discovering yourself along the way. And so the energetic breadcrumbs are the thing that allow you to do that, to have your own emergent process. They guide you forward. And they're also kind of the fuel that sustains you on the journey, because when you follow them, you get a little jolt of energy in your system. And so when it's a new concept, I recommend people just each night before bed for 1 week, just journal. When did I feel the most energized today? When did I have more energy at the end of an activity or a conversation than I did at the beginning? And what specifically was it about that interaction that energized me? Was it the person? Was it the topic? Was it that I brought together these disparate ideas in a way that I could tell was unique and that really resonated? Was it that I helped them in some way? So just becoming your own kind of research experiment on yourself and starting to track your own energetic breadcrumbs is a great practice to bring you towards a richer, more joyful life.
Yeah, I love that. And, I think we would all benefit from really getting clued up and aware of our energy levels, because we often think of time being this thing that's finite, which of course it is, but we don't think so much about our energy being finite, like what we could even do or be in one given day. But it's like, actually, I know for me, I'm quite extroverted, so I'm energized by having a conversation just like this, and I will kind of come off and probably be bouncing and make a cup of tea and be happy. And probably for my partner, who's more introverted, for him, that will be something that he needs to resource himself from at that moment. So I think like just becoming more aware of those things, and of course the expansive joy, those things that really light you up, that's often when people describe in a professional setting as being a calling, right? I don't know if that's what you feel like now. What is like lighting you up in what you're doing at the moment?
Oh, wow. For me, I've actually been getting into a whole new world around sex magic and tantra and all these things. And that's been my new energetic breadcrumb. Yeah.
Nice.
Sort of, I know, which I never thought I would go in that direction, but that's what is calling to me right now. And there's been so many serendipitous things. I mean, that's the other thing. When you follow your breadcrumbs, you often have serendipities and coincidences that start to occur. 3 different people mention the same book to you in a week. Maybe that's an energetic breadcrumb for you to follow. So that's kind of where I've been feeling really energized and curious, and, crazy things like using the energy of orgasm to clear shame from your body and things like that is what I've been tuning to and have been getting a lot of, curiosity about.
Yes, love that. And anyone listening who's interested in that too, I did a previous podcast episode with a sex therapist, Jacqueline Hellier, who spoke on that exact thing with releasing shame and so on. So loved that, and very much topic I'm into as well. But we will maybe do a repeat on the Tantra stuff another time. But let's come over to this other idea we mentioned about listening to the whispers of our soul.
Yeah. So one of the things I noticed in my own starting over journey is that the voice of my ego was so loud and insistent. And the voice of the soul, it would often come through as this tiny little whisper in the slivers of silence that I created in my mind. And so I got curious about how can I access that place, that wisdom more consistently? What does that even look like? And that's when I kind of coined the term listening to the whispers of your soul, because it often is just such a subtle little whisper. Just like the breadcrumbs, we can tend to dismiss it because you almost don't hear it. And if we get in go mode on that hamster wheel, just completing all the to-do list tasks in a given day, there's no space for the soul to come through. And that's why meditation or just going for walks in nature, journaling, there's lots of ways to start to access the whispers of your soul. There's a whole ritual I lay out in the book to do dialoguing with nature, which is a very simple and yet profound way to start to access some of those soul whispers. So you can actually be proactive about connecting with your soul.
So you're saying it comes through as something quiet that we've got to pay attention to be able to notice.
Yes. And we have to cultivate some level of stillness to hear it.
Yeah. One thing that has come up a lot for me in this idea about listening to life's whispers is how to distinguish between that, the voice, the quiet voice of somebody's intuition or inner knowing, inner wisdom, versus subconscious or underlying fears based on previous trauma or whatever. Like, I know that that's something that comes up so much, and people are like, but I don't know if that's just a little voice that's telling me like not to do something, but I shouldn't listen to that. Do you have anything to say on that front?
Well, so the whispers of the soul, sometimes they can trigger fear once you start thinking about the how, but they usually feel authentically good in the moment that you experience them.
Yes. Okay. Great point. Love that. The how, I can see that because that is often when it comes up. Like, I think I had that even with this podcast. It's like, this feels right. I want to do this. And then all of a sudden you think of the steps you need to take and go, oh gosh. So yeah, great point. I'm going to move into the final fast few questions now before we wrap up. So the first thing I want to ask is there something that you used to believe that you no longer believe?
I think I used to believe there was something fundamentally wrong with me, that I was, like kind of bad or flawed and I will say, having done all the work on myself over the last 10 years, I still go into the inner critic and all of that, but there's a way in which that I've let go of that old story.
Beautiful.
Not that it doesn't still get triggered, because it does, but the belief in it is not there in the same way.
Isn't it so nuts that that's something we seem to all have?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of heartbreaking, but also maybe why we're here to, learn and move through that.
Yes, exactly. I think there's some kind of quote or saying on what we believe to be the most personal is actually the most universal. And I think that's an exact example of that.
Yes.
Second, what is one quote or affirmation that resonates with you that you'd like to share?
I mean, the one that I've been using myself lately is, I am exactly where I need to be.
I love that. Yeah, that's nice. Why does that matter? Or how does that help you?
Well, it helps with all the striving, the not enoughness, the gotta go do all the things or make it all happen. It just brings a sense of calm and ease to my nervous system. I also I talk about in the book, this whole concept of busy as a badge of honor in our culture and how busyness has been equated with worthiness. And one thing you can do to counteract that is to stop saying I'm busy And then instead, you can use the affirmation, I have plenty of time for everything that really matters to me, or I make time for what's most important to me.
Yeah, I love that. Beautiful. And lastly, what is one final message that you will give our listeners who want to tune into life's whispers or their own soul's whispers, their intuition, and live a more authentic and aligned life?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's just two simple things. One is to slow down, get quiet enough to tune in and listen to those breadcrumbs, those soul whispers. And then two is to take one small action on it. Because when you take a small action on it, it validates it. And then you learn to trust yourself more and more. So if there's anything that we discussed today, and we went through a whole range of topics, if any of them gave you as a listener a little energetic breadcrumb, then maybe follow that. Take some small action to move towards that, whether that's reaching out to someone, reading a book, sending a message about an email to someone, Googling something that you want to learn more about, deciding to do one practice, maybe listening to the Surrender, Allow, Trust meditation, or journaling every night on your energy for 1 week. If anything sparked your interest, then just notice what sparked and take a small action.
Beautiful. Love it. Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you very much for your time. Listeners, her book, if you're curious, is called The Soul Solution, a guide for brilliant, overwhelmed women to quiet the noise, find their superpower, and finally feel satisfied. It's been a pleasure, Vanessa.
Well, thank you for having me, Shannon. It's been a true joy.